Hello and welcome. You're listening to Rogue Resistance, a podcast in support of ORD2 Indivisible. I'm your host, Rhonda Nowak. Fellow Oregonians, I don't have to tell you that our country is once again caught in a recurring and disturbing cycle. When fear and uncertainty rise, so too does racism and anti-immigrant rhetoric and policy. Too often, immigrants are scapegoated for the government's own failures to effectively address economic, social, and political challenges. To see what I mean, let's look back in history at several examples of discriminatory laws against Mexican immigrants specifically. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, close to 2 million people of Mexican descent, including U.S. citizens, were swept up in the Mexican repatriation program. In 1954, President Eisenhower's Operation Wetback deported an estimated 300 to 400,000 Mexican immigrants. Wetback was a racial slur that came from the immigrants' wet clothes after crossing the Rio Grande to reach the U.S. border. Of course, the name was intended to dehumanize Mexican immigrants. During the Reagan era in 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act was supposed to offer amnesty to undocumented Mexican workers, but it actually criminalized hiring them and intensified border patrol. After 9/11, fear of immigrants again intensified, which led to House Bill 4437 in 2005. This bill was aimed at making undocumented immigration a felony rather than a civil offense, and even criminalized aid to undocumented immigrants. The bill did not pass the Senate, but it did succeed in stoking more fear and more anti-immigration laws, including Arizona State Bill 1070 in 2010. The so-called Show Me Your Papers law legalized racial profiling, and this law was copycatted in several other states across the country. And of course, there's the Trump era and all of his predatory actions against Mexican and other Latin American immigrants in the United States. Since his reelection, Trump has unleashed more than 180 immigration-related executive actions. Trump's dehumanizing language, like they're rapists, they're animals, they're invading and infesting our country and destroying the blood of our country, isn't just political theater. His xenophobic actions aim to criminalize immigration itself and severely infringe on civil liberties, even for those who have worked in the U.S. legally for decades, doing jobs other Americans depend on to feed ourselves, house ourselves, and even care for our sick and elderly. Given that we are a nation of immigrants, the hypocrisy of it all is staggering. Fear and hypocrisy go hand in hand, and they seem to show up like clockwork over and over again whenever there is an opportunity for immigrants to be used as political pawns. But fear and hypocrisy are only half of the story. The other half is what I want to focus on for the rest of this episode, and that is America's shameful history of immigrant oppression has always been met with creative resistance, particularly through the arts. What has artistic activism looked like during the most extreme anti-immigration periods in our country? Let's start in the 1930s. You probably know Dorothea Lange for her Dust Bowl photos, but she also turned her camera toward Mexican American families who were being deported, sometimes even if they were U.S. citizens. Now, across the border, Diego Rivera was painting massive murals celebrating indigenous identity and labor solidarity. His 1940 piece, Pan American Unity, is still on display at City College of San Francisco. Jump ahead to 1965. El Teatro Campesino, the farm workers' theater, took theater to the picket lines and gave workers a voice. Skits, satire, and songs became tools of resistance and empowerment, woven directly into the heart of the labor movement. In 1967, Rodolfo Gonzalez shook the Chicano movement with his poem, I Am Joaquin. It's an epic declaration of identity, equal parts protest,
pride, and poetry. A few years later, Xavier Viramontes puts protest on paper with his poster, Boycott Grapes, Support the United Farm Workers Union. A clenched fist squeezes a bunch of grapes, and it looks like they're bleeding. This isn't just poster art, it's a visual rallying cry. Then there's Malaquias Montoya. His 1980 poster, Undocumented, is painful to look at, and that's the point. A figure is caught in barbed wire, head hanging, arms outstretched like a crucifixion. Montoya's asking, how many lives are we willing to destroy in the name of border control? Now we hit the punk scene. LA band Los Illegals released Internal Exile in 1983, and their lyrics hit like a slap. They weren't just playing music, they were screaming the reality of being criminalized for existing. Amalia Mesa Baines brings something different to the table: altars. Her 1992 installation, Queen of the Waters, Mother of the Land of the Dead, is part shrine, part protest. She uses mirrors, candles, and cultural symbols to honor the dead and the displaced. By 2010, Fabiana Rodriguez is out in the streets with her poster, You Have Rights. It's bright, bold, and bilingual. Commissioned by the Immigrant Defense Project, it's designed to catch your eye. Rodriguez uses art to arm people with knowledge, and that's a form of resistance too. In 2014, the band La Santa Cecilia won a Grammy, but their most powerful work is the song Ice El Hialo. It's about families torn apart by immigration raids. It's not just music, it's testimony. Melanie Cervantes designs dignity with her 2016 digital illustration Brown is Beautiful, countering culture that constantly says otherwise. It's a simple statement, but in a society built on racial hierarchies, that kind of affirmation is radical. Then in 2017, French photographer JR installs giants, Caquito and the Border Patrol, a towering image of a baby peeking over the U.S.-Mexico border wall. Of course, a toddler isn't a threat. And yet, we built entire policies out of fear of people like Caquito and his parents. In 2018, performance artist Guillermo Gomez Peña staged Welcome to a World Without Trump. It was wild, theatrical, unapologetically political. He challenges artists to take the lead in resisting authoritarianism, not with politeness, but with fire. In 2020, Enrique Chagoya released The 7 Deadly Sins, Anger, part of a series that pulls from comic books, religious iconography, and pop culture. He exaggerates and distorts to show how distorted our politics really are. In 2021, Patrick Martinez installed neon signs that say things like, immigration is natural. His work glows, not just literally, but symbolically. And finally, Victor Quinones's 2025 sculpture, Ice Scream, looks playful at first, just a bright yellow popsicle. But take a closer look. Embedded inside are a pair of metal handcuffs, and the base read Inhumane and Cruelty Enforcement. These artists haven't just documented injustice, they've challenged it, reimagined it, and refused to let it stand unopposed. That tradition of creative resistance isn't just something that happened elsewhere or in the past. It's alive and well right here in the Rogue Valley. One artist who embodies this powerful blend of art and activism is Ashland-based Manya Yana Campos, a Chicana poet, visual artist, and community organizer. Manya's book, Legalize My Mother, blends poetry, memoir, and essay to confront anti-immigrant sentiment head-on. As the creative director behind Talali, a new Ashland restaurant rooted in ancestral food preparation practices and food justice, she extends her resistance from page and canvas to the kitchen. I recently sat down with Manya to explore how her poetry, her art, and her culinary vision intersect to nourish and inspire in the face of xenophobia and exclusion under the Trump administration. Hi, Manya. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I really appreciate you inviting us here to this lovely spot.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Very honored to be here. I would like to ask if I can start with a short land acknowledgement. When I was teaching poetry at SOU, I decided my curriculum was really a decolonized curriculum. So every class I started with a land acknowledgement or a prayer, which is a part of my culture and the piece that I wanted to bring to an institution like Southern Oregon University. Gratefully, I was very much accepted and able to do that. So I want to begin by thanking the original peoples of this land, including those across borders. It is important to remember that the original peoples are still here, caretaking the land, fighting for water rights, animal rights, and basic human rights. I want to take a moment to honor La Madre Tierra, the Mother Earth, who has been ripped open and entered without sacred permission, dug through and dishonored. She still shares her abundance, her fruits, her herbs, her flowers. She is a stubborn root, delicate and resistant. I want to honor El Fuego, the sacred fire that ignites passion and purpose. I want to honor El Aire, the air that reminds us that nothing is permanent. I want to honor El Agua. Her water rages, her anger is palpable, yet she continues to give us life. Lastly, I want to honor each and every one of you. We all have a sacred purpose on this earth, in this body, and in this lifetime. Every disease has a plant to cure it. Every person has a mission. We must never forget this. Tlazokamati. Thank you for letting me do that.
Well, thank you. It's very beautiful and so important. I want to start off by asking you, how did you come to be here in beautiful Ashland, Oregon?
So I moved here in 2015 because I got into the creative writing program at Southern Oregon University. When I was there, I was probably one or two out of a class of about 50 graduating students that were person of color. So it was definitely a very lonely experience for me. I connected with a few other students of color who felt the same way, felt very isolated, that their stories were not being reflected, that our culture was being stereotyped. And so I was able to speak up and be a voice for that. I felt like coming back and having the opportunity to be a teacher, I think teachers have so much power in how they set the tone of what's accepted and what's not in the classroom. And if the teacher doesn't have that lived experience, it's very easy to overlook the experiences of people of color. And so for me as a teacher, how am I going to set the stage to make sure that all cultures and all people are really celebrated and that we're not seen as a monolith? I was raised by a very powerful, strong, brown, indigenous mother who told me to never, ever forget where you came from. Don't you ever forget who you are. She didn't have any schooling past the second grade. She was part of a family with 12 siblings. They barely had enough to eat. My grandfather was a sugarcane farmer in a very small village. They didn't even have enough money to have shoes. So what she taught me was the richness from inside, the richness of the lived experience and the richness of the earth that indigenous people inherently know because it is in us. It is that ancestral knowledge that's passed down and so palpable. So for me, it's really important to continue to teach that and to remind all Black and brown people, especially children, that we have that ancient knowledge that is not respected, that is not valued in this country and in the Western world in so many ways. So I was able to take that into the classroom because I have some incredible professors who wanted to help me come into the classroom and be able to lead the creative writing department. As a Chicana artist and scholar, spirits, I always felt like my spirituality was never allowed in academic settings. And for me, that's inherently part of who I am in my art. When I do my art, I go into another realm and I connect with my ancestors, my abuelitas. And that's very important to me. And so I started to think, how do I bring in this energy of spirit into a very stale, white classroom? I'm going to acknowledge the elements, my people, the ancestors that are here with us, and empower my students to connect to something bigger.
How were you received by your students?
It was absolutely incredible. A lot of my students are young, suffering from depression, anxiety, a sense of disempowerment in what's going on in the world politically. A lot of them were part of the LGBT community. So that was a way that I think they were able to feel seen, and everything was able to be celebrated in that classroom. But I told them, I don't want to just create a safe space. I want to create a sacred space. I'm going to push you to be outside of your comfort zone. Because if we want to be artists and writers, storytellers, story keepers, we have to be willing to be uncomfortable, because you can't grow if you're not uncomfortable. And what I see with a lot of young people, I have teenagers in my house, is that there is a culture now of containment. There's a culture of fear, and I understand, but I'm there to support and guide the students to break out of their comfort, to take a risk, to be adventurous. And I mean that on the outside and on the inside, which means be uncomfortably vulnerable and intimate with yourself, because I believe that is how people grow, and that's how you make strong art that's going to change the world. It was very important for me to encourage my students of color to be able to feel empowered enough to write the way they speak. Writers have so much power, so much power. So stand up and speak your truth and be able to feel the ancestors at your back, because that's what they want to see in order to change this fucked up system that does not work. And we all see that it does not work.
Now tell us about Legalize My Mother.
So Legalize My Mother is a collection of 90 different poems. There are lyric poems, there are chant, there are portrait poems, and there are prose poems. And it's a collection that I've been working on for the past 6 years. It's all these different parts of myself that have kind of come together. There are pieces of food and fruit and song and flower. And so it's kind of spread out like an altar. It is a call to action to respect the earth and to respect the brown woman who caretakes the earth. What I wanted to do is really disrupt any idea of what a book is supposed to look like, how a book is supposed to be arranged. And that's why I created a collection. I also was able to pull a lot of ideas from my textiles. I do a lot of textiles based on an indigenous garment called a webil from Mesoamerica.
I love that idea of pulling from a completely different art form.
Most of my poems are born from rage, from moments of, like the other day, I was sitting with my partner on the phone with my sister and my kids, and we were having this conversation, and it was sexy and romantic and beautiful and passionate. And these two women next to us were disturbed by our joy. They got up and they said, "Oh, this is too loud." And they walked away. So I said, "Wow, that's a poem right there. Does our brown joy offend you?" And that's how I feel living in Ashland. That the joy of Black and brown people just existing, living who we are, is offensive, because it interrupts this idea of peace or stillness, or that the white demographic is seen as the center of the universe when it's not.
I love the fact that you're able to take your rage and create something beautiful.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because as a brown woman, anytime we speak up, we are seen as angry. We are seen as hysterical. I mean, all women in general too, but especially as a brown woman, you are seen as more dangerous, aggressive, this injustice that is very enraging. And being able to say that my rage is beautiful. My rage is important. Anger tells you something. A line has been crossed. This is not okay. Anger is a messenger. I was raised by a very powerful woman who never allowed me to dim my light. And she would always say, "You always speak. Always." So the poem that I would like to read is a poem called, let's talk about peace. Peace is not the sound of sirens blazing through the street after your white neighbors call the police, because the sound of laughter and mariachi music is just too Mexican for a Sunday. They love our food, our art, but not us. Peace is not Black and brown bodies folding into the tired routine of fear as the remains of tamales and a mermaid piñata is lost in the talk of deportation. Peace is not learning at a young age to stay silent, to fear the white gaze, to apologize for your mother's accent, thick like atole. Peace is not learning at a young age that your quality of life, that your families, your communities is not as important as those of your white friends and neighbors. Peace is not the privilege of calling yourself woke, progressive, democratic, liberal, alternative, all for Black Lives Matter, against immigrant brutality, when you live in a reality that does not include the experiences and the fears of others unlike you. Peace is not isolation. Peace is not sitting in your home as you avoid the eyes of your brown neighbor. Peace is not defending a system that teaches our children that the white experience is the center of the universe, that Black and brown girls aren't as important, that their hair, their skin, their story is not beautiful and valuable, that Black and brown men are born to be feared and killed. Peace is not the taste of a mother's panic as she waits in line at the welfare office, her tits dried up and spent, her throat cut up like stones, while others feast on capitalism. Peace is when the screams, sharp as the blade of a machete, turn into the sound of birds praying, their sweet voices stuck in the braids that curve down my sister's back, my grandmother's back, a dark river connecting us home. Peace is the moment my mother released the words illegal alien from her lexicon. The moment she said out loud, I am the daughter of a farmer. I am a survivor of racism. I am resilient. I am resilient. Peace is the moment I spit out the taste of trauma I carry in my mouth, the breath of blood. Because the moment I heal, my mother heals, my grandmother heals, and my daughter, my son, surrounded by 100 women, elders, teachers, brujas, medicine mamas, break through the chains of our mangled history and plant little seeds into the rich Black earth. The sound of peace will then be heard.
That's very powerful. What do you hope your audiences take away from that?
I hope that it makes them shift their perspective of what they believe is normal, what they believe is just the regular existence of a lot of the community members. I think that white privilege is something that we all suffer from. White supremacy is a poison that we've all eaten. Black and brown girls believe that the closer they are to whiteness, the more desired they are, the more beautiful they are, the more accepted, the more intelligent they are, which is such a lie. I hope that when people hear my work, it makes them question what they've never questioned before. That is what I try to bring into this community that I love so much. I've been in it for 10, 11 years, and I continue to just create spaces where I can be fully myself and where I don't have to hold back. For me to see the actual people of the culture, the descendants of this culture, being able to create a business to support and feed their family is the most revolutionary thing you can do right now. Creating a space like Denali, a space that says, if you know who you are, nobody can take that away from you.
This restaurant is another extension of your artistic activism and also community building.
Exactly.
You're building community through this restaurant.
This is a creative collaboration. We have an incredible community of Indigenous Latinx artists in this area, and we are very connected. One of my best friends, who's also an incredible artist, who also runs a nonprofit in the area, Coalición Fortaleza, she designed our logo for us. And then our other friend, Gabriel Barrera, who's an incredible muralist and scenic designer, he painted the sign. He did a lot of the artwork in here. Another friend, Franco, came and painted the bathrooms. He did a lot of Indigenous Nowak word and lettering on the walls. So everyone came together to be able to create this space where we can be proud of who we are, where we feel accepted, where we feel celebrated, where this idea that Latin food is cheap and greasy is demystified, because that is not true. So for me, part of decolonizing, part of the activism, which I don't even like that word, because for me, it's inseparable for who I am. As a brown Indigenous woman in America, as the daughter of an immigrant, it is my lived experience. I don't have a choice. It's how I walk, it's how I live, it's how I breathe, it's how I write. And so it is infused in the space that I create.
And you have two partners.
Yes. Freddie Herrera is my fiance and partner. We were supposed to have our wedding around this time. We decided to be crazy and open up a restaurant.
Instead,
this restaurant was actually part of our love story. We fell in love working at Mezcal together, which Freddie helped to design and start. When I saw him, I had a premonition. I knew right away I'm going to marry that man and have a baby with him. Wow. And from then on, it was in the stars. Our dream was to open up a space that was able to capture that essence, to be able to celebrate the pride that we have for our culture and our food and our people. And then my sister was the missing piece. She came in. She said, I want to be in the kitchen. And I said, perfect. I want to be the front of the house.
How long have you been open?
1 month.
How has the community responded?
It's been incredible to be able to see that people really feel and taste the heart and soul. What I call this is like Latin soul food. For me, it was really important to celebrate food from all across the Americas, especially with what's going on right now. Politically, I think it's really important to remember that we are Latin American. We are part of the Americas. And so to call ourselves Latin American cuisine, we can really celebrate the diversity of our Mexican culture. My fiance's family is from Guatemala and El Salvador, so the Central American culture and food, as well as celebrating South American influence. I really not only want to highlight indigenous food practices, but really celebrate and acknowledge the huge contributions of the African and Black diaspora in Latin America. So we do a lot of Afro-Caribbean dishes. There's a story in all of these dishes. I feel like we are like lovingly educating people through our food, through our story. I think one of the most powerful ways to be able to teach people is through these stories.
Resistance doesn't always take the form of a march or a speech. It can be a paintbrush, a camera, or a story that moves people to act. That idea is also at the heart of the work of ORD2 Indivisible. From knitters and sign makers to visual artists and writers, ORD2 members use their talents to inspire action and keep hope alive, even when times feel dark. Creative resistance is woven into the fabric of the ORD2 community. It's how we show up, speak out, and stay connected. In fact, this podcast is my own act of creative resistance, a way to amplify voices, share stories, and remind us that democracy thrives when we stay engaged. So I sat down with two local artists from ORD2 Indivisible, whose work beautifully blends art and activism. Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Sure.
This podcast episode is about creative resistance, and it's important in times like these when a lot of people feel angry about what's going on politically, but they just don't know what to do with all their angst. Both of you are combining your art with activism. Dasha, let's begin with you. Tell me about your family's escape from Czechoslovakia during the Russian invasion and how that fueled your passion for creative resistance.
Well, in 1968, the Russian tanks rolled into Prague, where I lived with my parents. We fled. We actually got a visa to travel to England to attend my sister's wedding. It was very chaotic a year after the invasion. So we packed up a little car that my mom got as a repatriation. She got money from German government for being in concentration camp, and she bought that little car. So that was our little car that we packed with summer mattresses and cans of food because we didn't have money to go to restaurants on the way. We went to the wedding, and on the way back, we stayed at my sister's friends, and my parents watched the replay of the tanks rolling into Czechoslovakia. And my mom had a nervous breakdown, and she said, we can't go back. So there was decided on the spot that we would stay in Holland. We only had enough stuff for the wedding and for the trip, so everything stayed behind in Prague. But we were fortunate enough to get a political asylum. We got lots of help from Dutch government who secured a little rental for us. It was a very hard time in the beginning, but we were lucky to stay there. I went to art school there. I studied in The Hague at the Royal Academy of Visual Arts. I was really very depressed first 2 years because I lost all my friends. I had to learn the language. And so before I settled, it was really hard, but I got the best education. I got the free education. All I had to pay was for materials and books. I'm thankful for my mom being so courageous to stay. She was in her 50s. To stay abroad and start a new life.
Your parents never went back to Czechoslovakia?
No, they couldn't return back because for next 20 years, the Czechoslovakia was under basically Russian occupation. And there was a political process with us. My uncle had to go to the, court. And the judge decided that my father got 2 years in prison and my mom and I got 6 months had we returned. Because we traveled legally, we got a visa, but we never returned back. I went back for the first time in 1990, a year after the communism fell.
How did that experience influence your decision to combine your art with activism?
Well, that is a funny story. I worked as a graphic designer for Women's Sports and Fitness in Palo Alto. And then I worked as a photographer for Palo Alto Weekly. And then I moved here and I was still traveling up and down. And then it was kind of like, I'm semi-retired. What am I going to do with my life? And I remember going to the first meeting in front of the courthouse in Medford. And it was Jessica Sage and Brett Levick. My focus just changed totally. I was standing there talking to people, warning them about what was coming, warning them about fascism, because I'm a second generation Holocaust survivor. And my grandparents and my auntie and my grandmother, they didn't survive. So I knew that story and I could feel what was coming. And I just found a calling. Here I just did instant arts, graphic design and photography. So I have been doing this for 8 years now.
I think it's
Yeah,
very
new
cool
energy.
that you were with ORD2 Indivisible shortly after they were established, after the first Trump administration, and you're still active with the organization now.
You know, it's like I built a family. So the biggest gift that he could have given us, the orange one, is given us these close relationships with wonderful people.
Kelly, what about you? What is your background in art and how did you become involved with ORD2 Indivisible?
I've always had artistic inclinations like Dasha had shared growing up and dabbled with different mediums throughout the years and never really thought to have taken it seriously until divorcing my son's father. That was quite an ordeal. And I thought I deserved a treat. So I went to art school for a couple of years locally over in Ashland and then spun off over into Medford. And its focus was primarily fine art. So I learned the rudimentary things of painting and how to see visually and then emulating it onto canvas, and did that for a couple of years whilst raising my children and working as a single mom and dabbled here and there, but not as a serious artist. I had never been politically motivated in getting involved in any kind of organization. But when I moved out there a month later, it was on the heels of Trump getting elected, and our neighbor said, let's go to the Women's March in DC. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So we all loaded up in a car and went to Maryland, stayed on a farm, and then took the train into DC. And that just snapped for me. I thought, you know what? My children are raised. This is my second chapter in life. My newfound passion in standing up against the onslaught and bullshit of the Trump administration, I thought, well, why don't I get involved with Indivisible? So I started going to little meetings. There were probably 5 people, but I thought I'll stick with this and get to know people. And in order to sustain the momentum, we need to blow some life and joy into our lives and contribute in that manner. So it came to me, I had seen on Instagram that a girl was wearing this protest dress that had all these anti-Trump things on her. She was dressed up like the Statue of Liberty. And I thought that would be fun to do. So I took it upon myself to buy the supplies and start whipping it out and painting it, and found a model. Dasha came over and helped me. And I thought, this was really fun. Let's just keep rolling with it. So we've been cooking up ideas for the future. Right now I'm working on parade puppets that can be used for protesting. And I feel like it'll add an element of joy visually for people to see and go, wow. I mean, I remember the first time I saw a parade puppet, I thought, that is amazing. It captivates everybody's attention and draws you in, as does art usually. Okay. One thing that I heard that really has stuck with me is that find something that you love that can contribute to the cause. And if it's something you love, you can stick with it for the long haul.
This is something that we're planning to do starting on June 20th. Art for Democracy group. Everybody is welcome. Artists, crafters, people who have never done it before. We want to start an art group as a kind of a social getting together, arts and craft.
Art therapy.
Yeah, we'll do boulders, we'll do little pebbles, and we'll do little dolls. That was Teresa's idea, to do the little resistance dolls based on the Russian
dolls.
That's what they do in Russia. They create these little protest dolls and leave them in places. So we're gonna do the same. We'll come up with new ideas, but use it as kind of a therapy to get your feelings out and feel like, hey, I'm not alone, I'm connected. It's many of us out there. Because really, if you walk through Medford or Ashland, you don't see really anything political. It's like life goes on like normal, but it's really not normal.
It's not normal, yeah.
It's not. So these little figures, I'm going to drill a hole into the side and create a sign. Everybody can make their own sign and stick it to it.
And we're going to do a collective of making banners that people can do the parade route of different famous historic
figures. We bought posters that we're going to make collages out of. And that's going to be done during our art collective meeting. So we'll have fun stuff for people to do.
Yeah, because art therapy is a thing. And, you go to a different place when you are creating art. And I guess that's why I've immersed myself so much in these last dark years. I just needed, for self-preservation, go to a nice place. And that's where art takes you.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right.
And I think it would be great to just kind of have people get on board so they can do that as well and find some joy.
Yeah.
Because we need to keep this momentum going.
And keep people involved also.
Keep people involved, keep people's spirits up, keep the momentum going. And like I said earlier, if you find something that you love, you can stay the course.
This all sounds very exciting. So what advice would you give to emerging artists who want to use their creativity as a form of political resistance?
I'm just going to share something with you from the old times in Czechoslovakia, right? During the hard times, during the suppression, the artists were up front, the musicians. The resistant arts is always thriving.
It's a result of hard times. I mean, if you think back on the Renaissance in Italy and all in through Europe, it was a response to the Dark Ages.
Right. And even in Harlem, there was the Harlem Renaissance.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, there's histories of artists rising to the surface and breaking through and creating new impactful things as a result of hard times. Yeah. And art breaks through to the soul. More than words, more than arguments or political debate, that makes more of an impression.
And another wonderful thing about arts is that you can get a group together and create something as a collective.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I love to create behind my computer, but sometimes I feel like I need somebody's input and
bounce ideas.
I love to see how your brain works and how you come up with these, it's so delicious, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. Ladies are inspirational. So thank you for sharing your time with me and for sharing your artistic talents with all of us. Appreciate it. Dasha and Kelly's Art for Democracy project is a living example of what creative resistance can look like when it's rooted in community. Every Saturday morning from 9 to 11, people can come together, not because they're professional artists, but because they care. They care about democracy, social justice, and about each other. What matters is the act of creating itself. As Dasha and Kelly tell us, it's a way to push back against despair and say, I'm here, I'm paying attention, I'm not giving up. No art experience is needed, just a desire to show up, and create. You can learn more by emailing Dasha at Dasha, DASJA, at DashaDolan, DOLAN.com. You know, hearing from our local artists reminds me that artistic activism often happens out in the streets, on fences, in store windows, and in the hands of people quietly doing the work of making change visible. You don't have to look far to find acts of creative resistance. Just keep your eyes open and pay attention.
Fellow Oregonians, I'm out here pounding the pavement today. I don't have camo on, and I don't have a hoodie covering up half my face. But I'm doing what the Department of Homeland Security would do if it gave a darn about the First Amendment, and that is, I'm surveilling for acts of creative resistance. Folks, today it looks like I have hit the mother lode. I've stumbled upon a rogue faction of radical fiber artists who call themselves the Knitter Resistors. That's right, they're out here in downtown Ashland, needles flying, yarn balls rolling, with protest signs. Hello, ladies. So rather than a sit-in, this is a knit-in. Exactly right. Tell me what you're doing.
Well, we're out here knitting and protesting at the same time.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. We wanted to do something that was approachable and that people could relate to and be curious about, and that we could do regularly. So we came up with this idea of sitting on the plaza and knitting and bringing our protest sign.
I see. And so what are you knitting?
I'm making a hat. I'm making a dish towel.
And no muffler for Congressman Bentz so that we don't have to listen to his lies. He says he supports Medicaid, but he wants to cut it in the big, beautiful bill.
Yes, I'm not sure Cliff Bentz is knit-worthy.
Yes, you're probably right about that. So tell me, ladies, how long have you been weaponizing wool?
We've started doing this in February.
How are people reacting to you sitting here knitting with your protest signs?
We hear a lot of support. Every once in a while, someone will ride by or drive by with a derogatory comment, but they usually just speed right off.
And you don't want to chase them with your knitting needles down the road?
I would like to talk to them, but they go off so quickly and I have to be quicker on my feet. I would like to understand how they can object to due process, how they can object to loving our neighbors.
They're afraid of powerful women.
And there's nothing that says power like a group of women sitting quietly on a bench knitting, right?
Exactly.
But you don't have to be loud and obnoxious in order to make your voices heard. And you are a perfect example of that.
Thank you.
Chris made flyers that we can hand out to people that are interested, that have our Congress people's contact information. And she's also listed some websites like Chopwood, Carry Water, 5 Calls, Indivisible, Hopium, that people can look at for ideas about what to say when they call their Congress people.
So there's an educational component to all of this as well.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And as self-help, we have a list of things to do for people to take care of themselves, because we all need to take care of ourselves right now.
So important. What are some of those?
Laugh, take a walk, talk to a supportive friend, bake cookies.
The first time we did a protest, I had just said to one of our friends here, Nani, that I wished I had a cookie. And I looked up and there was a mix box being held out to me. 2 women had gone into Mix and bought a box of treats for us to thank us for being out here.
Wonderful. So you've got critics and then you've got people who are supporting you.
Yes.
That must feel really great.
It does.
Now, what is it about knitting that is so much a part of a self-care routine?
Inherent in knitting is letting go of other things. Because if you're doing something really complicated, you can't be thinking about other things, or you're doing something and it just all flows out.
I also think because it's repetitive and rhythmic, and at the end, you have created something. That's a great feeling to have a hobby where at the end of it, you actually have something that you can wear or display or give as a gift to help somebody keep warm in the winter. It's a great thing.
So folks, these women are fierce, focused, and fearless. armed only with needles and unrelenting hope. And let me tell you, they're not knitting sweaters. They're knitting the social fabric of American democracy back together, one stitch at a time. So the next time someone tells you resistance is futile, just point them toward the plaza in Ashland, where the knitter resistors will be, hurling in protest.
Today, we looked at the long and powerful legacy of anti-immigration policy and creative resistance in American history. What ties all of these stories together is the belief that art is not a luxury, it's a tool for change. And we need that tool now more than ever. If you feel inspired to add your voice to this growing chorus of creative resistance, I invite you to join us at ORD2 Indivisible. Whether you write, paint, sculpt, sing, sew, or simply show up, your talents, your presence, your resistance matters. Let's keep making good trouble. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Rogue Resistance. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay indivisible.